Gemma, Chapter 1, Golden. Gemma was only 5 minutes away from her parents' hut, but the jungle had already taken on a different personality. It was thicker, the trees had grown taller, the tea plants shaded the green forest a sinister red. There was no doubt about it. The jungle was more dangerous here, and Gemma laughed. As a baby, Gemma's parents had taken her on their expeditions over mountains, deserts, and vast seas. It was exciting, unpredictable, and deeply irresponsible. Now that they had settled down in the tropical rainforest, Gemma had to devise intricate plans just to sneak out for morning adventures. This particular plan hinged on the help of Milo, her ring-tailed lemur. Years of mischief, tomfoolery, and Gemma's influence had helped Milo develop skills that other lemurs would give their rings to have themselves, were such a transaction to be made possible. And on this morning, Milo was lying in Gemma's bed, wearing a wig made of straw, the same sandy blonde color as Gemma's hair, snoring loudly. In a stroke of genius, they had even braided into pigtails to match her style. They tried adding a pair of her old glasses, but those kept sliding down his face, given that she had a human-sized head, and his was irreparably lemur-sized. I swear her snoring is getting worse and worse, said Gemma's dad from the breakfast table, sipping on a warm tea. Gemma's mom raised an eyebrow from across her book. It doesn't even sound human, he continued. You are exaggerating a little, don't you think, dear? Gemma's mom said. But he was not, and had either of them walked one room over to check on their daughter, they may have shouted and woken up a little groggy primate with straw pigtails. A short walk away, Gemma brushed past a prickly bush and followed a small break in the twisted liana vines. She came to a wall of leaves and grew excited at the sound of movement ahead. She often felt like she could sense when adventure was near. In fact, she felt it almost every single day, and for the past year, she had been wrong roughly every single time. So, despite the eagerness to find something remarkable, her shock was genuine when she brushed the leaves aside in a small clearing, no larger than a rock pond, was a black jaguar. She bravely, confidently froze. As she rubbed the condensation from her glasses, Gemma spotted a small mammal underneath the jaguar's paw. Fur growing led to fur clarity, and she recognized the animal as a golden mole. Both rare and beautiful, a fear rushed in that, if she didn't act soon, the mole would be eaten or crushed under the jaguar's leg. Oh, Bramblerot, she whispered, half thinking, half not at all thinking. Gemma reached into the brown satchel at her waist and found a small piece of suede. Grabbed tightly inside was her favorite brass bell. It was dented, old gift from an even older grandma, and Gemma never left it behind when she ventured out. Normally, she reserved for it occasions that required making a lot of noise, but an emergency like this called for something much more risky. Stepping forward stealthily, Gemma used her other hand to free a thin purple ribbon from her hair, turning her pigtails into a pigtail. She pressed the sweat against the bell tightly to make sure that it didn't attract any unwanted attention. A few paces ahead, and completely unaware of Gemma, the jaguar lifted his paw up for just a moment, then pinned the mole down again. Gemma allowed herself a quick and disapproving scowl, then focused on the task at hand. She opened the cloth and tied the ribbon around an opening in the brass bell. Then, with the delicacy of a snowflake on a silk napkin at afternoon tea with the Queen, Gemma tied the other end of the ribbon in another knot. She slid backwards through the leaves and grabbed the closed suitable rock. As the jaguar leaned down with his teeth bared, Gemma tossed it towards the dense jungle to her left. Without a moment to spare, the jaguar lifted his head and whipped his body around. And that's when he heard a jingle, a strange, suspiciously close jingle. He whipped back the other way and heard the jingle again, but all the saw was jungle. He tried prowling around the clearing, looking for the source, but again saw only jungle. The jingles came faster, one after the other. The mole looked on in a surprise as the frustration grew. Then, in the type of overreaction that jaguars are known for, he leaped into the deep brush next to him, looking for anything to attack. Gemma immediately rushed in to grab the wounded golden mole and quickly hid behind the nearest tree. The jaguar ran back into the clearing and looked around with a vicious stare. As soon as he took another step, the bell which Gemma had fastened securely to his tail jingled again. Having lost his target and plagued by that mysterious jingle, the jaguar picked a direction, almost at random, and charged deeply into the dark tropical rainforest. When the jungles finally grew quiet, Gemma laid the golden mole down. "Don't worry, he's gone," she said, patting its head softly, "and he won't be sneaking up on anyone for a while," she added with a smile. The mole whisked out a teeny giggle, then shook out its fur. It looked up at Gemma for a long moment, then scrunched its nose. Without a sound, it dug a hole in the soft earth and dove down. Gemma watched in awe as it worked its way off sight at impressive speed. She peered down to catch one last glimpse, but its little feet had disappeared in a flurry of dirt and dust. Gemma looked around. She had maybe 10 minutes before her parents would try to wake her up and then find her missing. It was time to head back. Besides, she had found more than enough adventure for one day. Best for her to leave some for the other young explorers out there. Carefully, listening for the jingle of her favorite bell, Gemma weaved through the thick brush until it loosened and gave way to the path that she had personally made stump by stump over the better part of the year. She was almost to the hut when a small patch of dirt and a few steps ahead of her started to move and shake. Approaching slowly, she leaned down and saw the furry face of the golden mole pop up to greet her. It scurried out of its hole and looked Gemma up and down. Gemma waved hello instinctively as a matter of manners and without idea what else to do. The mole reached into the dirt, pulling out an instrument that Gemma had seen many times before. It was a dark blue compass, set on a weather chain. Gemma grabbed it with two curious hands, turning it over and around to inspect. The compass itself was older than her bell, she imagined, and built with much greater care. Then she reminded herself that her bell was now a Jaguar accessory, and no longer hers at all. By the time she was done thinking, the mole had hopped back down its hole, leaving the compass behind. Gemma decided then and there that golden moles are strange creatures with strange habits. It's worth noting, however, that this was an unfair generalization and would only serve her poorly. Later that day, Gemma sat at the kitchen table and watched her parents rush around the hut. The compass was hanging around her neck, unnoticed. She had never seen them so animated as they gathered their belongings and shouted out questions and comments to each other. It was on this day that they had revealed they'd be going away on a trip of indeterminate length without her. Milo looked up at Gemma, had cocked his head to the side. She patted her shoulder, the signal that it was okay for him to climb up and sit. Deftly, he raised her torso and rested. Most of the time, he just grabbed his tail around her neck. But today was different. He hugged his entire head with every member he had. Gemma, said her mom, come and take a walk with me to the waterfall. I have something to tell you. Chapter 2 Croquet 15 years later, Gemma was standing at the head of the mystic red. The sun lit up a bright blue midday sky. The salt water sprayed her glasses with every dip of the bow. After years of sailing the open ocean, she found it refreshing. Milo, being a land mammal in both nature and disposition, found it annoying. He had resigned himself to the squawks of seagulls, the smell of barnacles, and the fact that every single thing on their boat was constantly wet. But the salt water stung his nostrils, and that ruffled him the wrong way. He had no choice, thought, on such an important mission, but to brave the onslaught from atop Gemma's shoulder and help with their search. Gemma peered forward over the right side of the boat, which is called the starboard, as her uncle had taught her soon after her parents left. Then she peered over the left side of the boat, which is called the port. She always remembered which was which by reminding herself that left and port have the exact same numbers of letters. Starboard and right have an extraordinary different numbers of letters, and therefore were not part of her memorizing technique. That sea merchant told us the forgotten island would be right here, she exclaimed. Milo wrapped his tail around her neck and slid down to point to the dark blue compass still hanging around her neck, still rusted, but otherwise intact. She opened up the cover and tapped the glass. There was a jagged silver needle, lying lifeless inside just as it always did. Gemma looked down and said, "You know that thing doesn't work. It can't tell east from west or up from down. I need to remember exactly what that merchant said." She began to mumble across the mossy channel due south of her mountain. 3 days onward. Oh, what's the use? Milo leaped on the steering wheel as Gemma walked back to the stern of the boat and walked out across the water. It's called the Forgotten Island for a reason. It's lost to the world. Her hand instinctively gripped the railing as the boat shook as she moved. It slowed to a stop within seconds. That spun her head around to see Milo with his hand and tail in the air. It was often his pose when he wanted to make it clear that what had happened was not his fault. It was almost just as often the case that it was. Gemma looked over the side rail again and saw a dark patch of land that had been there at last glance. It was a small oval island. They had run aground. Milo hopped down from the steering wheel and swung over the side of the boat. Gemma's feet found the wooden rungs of the Jacob's ladder and stepped down to the dim shoreline. She bent and grabbed a handful of sand. It was blue, a deep blue, and dark green as well. Mixed together, it was the exact color of the ocean. "Remarkable," she said, looking around. "This must be the forgotten island, Milo." Less impressed, Milo grabbed a fallen coconut from the ground and started pulling it on a nearby stone. The coconut tree it came from was one of only 3 trees on the island. The second was a slightly larger coconut tree with equal or better quality and sized coconuts. The third was significantly smaller than the first two. Didn't grow any coconuts and was not a coconut tree. Apart from the trees, Gemma spotted a simple hut with a front thatched roof covered on all sides by vines. Next to it was the entrance to a small cave handmade from brown stones. Milo struck a victorious blow, splitting the coconut in two. He drank the water inside greedily, then offered Gemma the other half as a snack. "Thanks anyway, Milo," she said. "I'd rather go check out that hut." Gemma couldn't help starting into the dark mouth of the cave as she pushed in the hut's door. It dislodged from the frame in a sloppy commotion and fell to the floor. "Sorry," Gemma said to no one at all as they stepped on top and entered. She had decided long ago that manners are manners, whether someone is there to see them or not. Milo finished the coconut meat and threw his shell onto the hot floor. He had decided long ago that he was a lemur and therefore manners did not apply. Gemma opened 2 windows and tore down the ferret ring, vines covering them. The sunlight burst in to reveal a metal pot, suspended over a compact fire pit. She bent down and held her hands close to the wooden members. "It's still warm," she said with a suspicious tone. "Someone was here recently." They looked around to confirm that, despite the discovery, they were alone inside the hut. Milo picked his coconut shell up again and placed it on top of his head, just to be safe. Behind the pit, there was a small circular table with a dusty chair pulled out. It looked at Gemma as though the seat had been dusted off by a large hand. A quickly lap around the room uncovered an empty tin box and set of clay bowls, but nothing more exciting. Gemma walked to the nearest window and stared out. Shouldn't know that sea merchant was a liar. "There's nothing valuable here. We got horns," wailed Milo. Milo looked up at her indignantly. "Okay," she conceded. "I got horns wounded." 3 weeks early, Gemma sat at a lonely table in the shadows of Starlight Tavern, with a Milo by her side. She didn't enjoy the loud bar music or unruly patrons, but it was the best place in Harbour Town to conduct the shady administrative business that came along with treasure hunting. That is to say, it was the only place that allowed the kind of people she needed to meet. Across from her sat one of those very people, known to her only as the sea merchant. He was a handsome, mustached man with a tricorn hat, and at the moment he had her rapt attention. "It's up to you," he said, with a smile and a sip of his drink. He had a smooth way of talking that made even the saltiest words come out sweet. Gemma didn't trust him one bit. She took his words with a grain of regular colored sand, but she was listening. Milo stared at the merchant with the fierce protective glare that only a true friend possesses. Unbeknownst to Gemma, it had been 2 minutes since he last blinked. "And how do I know I can trust you?" she asked with an eyebrow raised. The sea merchant lauded, "You don't friend." Gemma studied his smile, the lines next to his eyes, the piece of corn stuck to his teeth that had he been a true friend, she would have mentioned it to him as a courtesy. "The price is a bit steep," she replied. "That it is," said the sea merchant, taking another sip. "But this is no ordinary bounty. Through great peril I came to find it. It's not every day someone offers you the most greatest treasures in the world." Gemma's face twisted. "The most greatest treasure in the world? I've heard those words before." The sea merchant slammed his drink down. "Aye, many have heard of it. None have found it." He leaned in closer. "But I know the way." Gemma gave a coy smirk. "If you know the way, why don't you go get it yourself? Surely it's worth more than you're asking." "This not in the stars for me, friend. No, I'll just stay here, safe and sound." He reached out an open palm. "And count my coins." She shrinks. It was the best lead she had gotten in months, and despite her concerns, she couldn't turn it down. Besides, she was desperate for adventure, and if what the merchant said was even half true, I would be the stuff of legends. Gemma looked to Milo and gave a nod. Without breaking his stare, Milo used his tail to lift up a bunch of coins and drop it on the table. Milo was the only lemur Gemma had ever met who had a pensive tail, capable of grieving things, and it never ceased to amaze her. The sea merchant snatched the bunch up before the sound even hit Gemma's ears. He took off his hat, leaned in close to cover the sides of their faces from a busy tavern, and whispered the instructions. The first rivers and channels and landmarks he mentioned were familiar, but the rest were completely foreign to her. She listened more carefully than she ever had before, repeating the words back to herself. When he had finished, Gemma turned to Milo and gave another quick nod. "Well, I guess that's all we need to know," she said, turning back to the sea merchant. "Thanks for—" But the sea merchant was not there to be seen. Only his hat remained. Gemma and Milo were genuinely impressed by the mystique of it for a few seconds, until they heard "You are welcome" from underneath the table. The sea merchant's hand reached up and grabbed the hat. Since it was a high-quality hat, and not the kind you would leave behind for the sake of mystique. Back inside the hut, Gemma looked out the window and sighed. I guess there were some red flags, she said. Her eyes settled on the rock cave outside. Come on, Milo. We might as well check every nook and cranny, she said with a shrug. Milo squatted as they stomped over the fallen door. A cranny. It's basically the same thing as a nook, she responded. As Gemma and Milo walked inside the cave, they carried someone of the island blue sand with them. The entrance sloped down on a path of dark brown dirt that went on longer than either of them expected. Then they reached the interior. The midday sun was almost completely blocked. Gemma left around the cold walls and found a sconce holding a torch. Milo flanked me, she said. Milo reached inside the small pouch at his side and pulled out a flying stone. Used of sparking flames, swiftly he tossed it past her open hand and hit her in the forehead. They had gotten good at starting cause fires but hadn't yet perfected the handoff. In a dark cave and without any practice throughout, they had almost no chance. Gemma lit the torch and uncovered a cave of deep red stone. The flame created shadows that danced over the nooks in the side of the cave. They danced over crannies as well, which it's worth noting are actually an entirely different thing than nooks. What drew both of their attention as soon as they saw it was a wooden chest in the center. As they walked forward, its gold trim and look shimmered in the light. With each approaching step, Gemma noticed a peculiar thing start to happen. From around her neck, the compass began to shake. She stopped to raise it over her head and opened the top. The jagged silver needle was vibrating loudly, testing a theory. She took a step forward, and the rate increased until it filled the room. It's never done this before, she said. Milo looked up at her with wide yellow eyes. Why would it shake now? It doesn't even work. Gemma carefully opened up the glass cover and grasped the needle to stop the shaking. It's almost like this, not a compass at all. She lifted her hand up and, to her surprise, removed the needle with ease. Milo scooted over to the lock and examined it excitedly. He jumped up and down. Gemma felt as though she understood what he meant. Throughout years of being best friends, they had developed their own king language, and she was rarely wrong. You want me to bake you a muffin, Milo? Rarely wrong, but sometimes. Milo scoffed and pointed at the clock. Oh, use the needle on the lock, she said. Well, it's locked and would look like your muffin dance. Gemma bent down and lined the needle up to keyhole to find it was roughly the same size. With the torch in one hand flickering wildly around the cave, she pressed the twisted needle into the lock. "Here goes something," she whispered, slowly. She turned the needle until she felt a click. The top to the chest popped open with ease. Gemma tapped her shoulder and Milo climbed up to see. She raised the torch and stared down. Inside, she saw her own face and Milo's destroyed by a blanket of ribs. It was water, dark ancient water, and in the center, floating with a culminance, was a tiny boat. Gemma had less than a moment to study it before she heard a familiar sound, one she had not heard for many years. It was the jingle of her old favorite bell. "Oh, Blumbered," she said. Chapter 3. Freed. Somewhere inside the cave, the jingle came again. Gemma turned to see a shadowy foliage figure growing larger. The steps were slow and deliberate. Each one was punctuated by the drawing roll of a bell along the dirt floor, swinging graceful from a ribbon. When he came into the light, Gemma cringed. His face had never left her, never lost its sharpness in her dreams. Milo slightly slunk behind the chest, out of sight, and Gemma was thankful at least for that. Gemma couldn't stand the thought of him being the apprenticed to a Gemma-sized main course. Without nothing to lose and no better ideas in her perfected mind, she spoke. "Hi there," she pushed out. "I like your ribbon. I used to have one just like it." The jaguar paused to rest on his back legs and stared, examining her face. His slim eyes opened a touch. Gemma slimed nervously. It was then no sooner or later than Gemma's teeth cleared her lips that the jaguar attacked. As he sprung towards her, he let out a growl more spine-shocking than Gemma had ever heard. They say that the fervor of a domesticated pet or long-caged beast is nothing when compared of the fierceness of a creature in the wild. Had you asked Gemma in that moment, she would certainly have agreed, and even more certainly would have wanted to discuss at a time when she was not the target of a jaguar pounce. As luck would have it, the jaguar would never reach her. Just inches from Gemma's face, which was scrunched up and bracing for impact, the jaguar was stopped. Sneaking in the shadows of the cave, Milo had made it to the other side just in time to reach out and grab the jaguar's tail. But a fast tail is thought to hold on, even for an experienced tail grabber like Milo. And this grip slid all the way down to the dangling body. The purple ribbon stretched and strained from the tension, Gemma grabbed the small ship from inside the chest and ducked away towards Milo, just as the bell and ribbon shaped of the jaguar's tail. The bell fell to the dusty ground with a jingle, but Milo clutched the ribbon in his hand. The jaguar's momentum caused him to fly forward and slam into the open lid of the chest, then down into the water with a splash. Gemma looked back bravely to see the lid fall down over his head. They rushed out onto the miniature beach and headed straight for the Mystic Red. Gemma looked down at Milo and got the nut she needed. She handed him the tiny ship, then picked Milo up and swung him over the boat's rail. This move had been mastered well beyond the flint tooth, as hasty escapes were commonplace for a pair of treasure hunters like them. Milo instinctively let out the sail for the reserve wind to push them off the shore. Gemma took 2 steps up the Jacob's ladder and held on as the boat cleared the shallows. The jaguar raced out of the cave, stopping with stride towards them, but came to a stop at the frothy shoreline. All he could do was sit on the blue sand and snarl and growl at the receding boat. Now that Gemma and Milo were both safely on board and protected by the wave between them, they found the jaguar less intimately than moments ago. Milo handed Gemma her purple ribbon, then steered the boat into the open ocean. Gemma tied the ribbon back into her hair and shortened off that stern in the back of the boat. Sorry, we snagged your tail and shot you into a chest of water, and sorry for taking the teeny ship you were warding. And Gemma turned back to Milo. This is the weirdest apology I've ever given. Milo nodded and bent the well to his left. We're just sorry, finished Gemma. She took over the command of the well and set off in the direction where the sky looked clearest. The forgotten island faded from view as swiftly as it had appeared, almost like magic. Milo sprawled out on the deck with the tiny ship and began examining it. He taped it on the side, wiggled the shuttle in back, and held it up from every angle. Find anything interesting? Gemma called out. Milo shook his head with a sigh and placed the ship onto the wooden deck. Then a painful smirk crept up as he decided to spin it around like a dreidel. It's hardly called that the most greatest treasure in the world. There must be more to it, she continued to herself. Most greatest treasure? Who tells like that? It's something a kid would say. The glint from the bow of another boat stole her attention. somehow it had come within 4 legs of the mystic red, without her noticing, and was now pulling alongside them. "We've got company, Milo." She shouldn't. But Milo's attention had been stolen too, not by the life-sized boat pulling ever closer, but by the tiny ship in his hands, spinning. It had betrayed an exciting secret. Something hidden was rattling around inside. The mystic red slowed to a stop as the strange knowing boat settled by its side. A 6-foot tall man with a dark curly hair and a long nose stepped away from his helm towards Gemma. "Ahoy!" he said, over the railing of his old, wonky boat. It was filled with so many kicks, canks, and thick trinkets that it looked like a giant had picked up a dozen different shops and shaken their contents on board. "Ahoy!" Gemma said back. "Pleasure to meet you. Might I ask your name, and the name of this fine vessel?" said the man. "My name is Gemma, and this is the Mystic Red. My friend's name is Milo, but he's a bit busy at the moment." Milo pulled off the crow's nest on top of the tiny ship and pickled it inside the hollow mast. His eyes grew two sizes when he spoke, and scroll that had been rolled up and tucked away. Using his lemur fingers, he clawed at its tongue, sticking out in concentration. "And you?" she asked back. The man proudly stepped aside to show the full span of his boat. "This here is the Dusty Rust basket," he said with a smile. Gemma looked confused. Do you mean Dusty Rust bucket?" "Bucket? This isn't a bucket. It's a boat," he shaved back. "I'm sorry," said Gemma. "I just thought." Milo pulled the scroll from the ship and let out a squeal of delight, finally taking notice of the stranger, the Dusty Rust bucket, and his general surroundings. He hid it behind his back and joined Gemma. "You thought wrong," added the man, still stinging from the question. "I won't happen again." Gemma replied with curiosity. "Charles, my name is Charles Bucket, but you can call me Chuck," he said with a grand bow. Gemma tapped her shoulder and Milo hooped up. "Milo, I'd like you to meet Chuck Bucket of the Dusty Rust bucket." As yet, it was the silliest sentence she had ever said aloud, but she still had many sentences and much silence ahead of her. Chuck Bucket gave a less exaggerated bow and half smile to Milo. "Now that we've all been introduced, might we discuss the wrinkle in your lemur's hand?" he asked. Chapter 4. Serpentine. Gemma hadn't noticed. It wasn't until Milo hesitated at the question, as she sometimes does when he's surprised, that she realized that was holding something behind his back. He shot her a sheepish stare, which is hard for a lemur to do. Slowly, he pulled out the thin scroll from behind his back. "Where did you get that, Milo?" Gemma asked, with surprise but no hips. "I believe it was from that little toy he was playing with over there," interrupted Chuck, pointing to the tiny ship on the deck of the Mystic Red. Milo offered it up to Milo. She grabbed it and shot him a stare. There was no room for secrets on a boat. That's something that Uncle Horace had taught her. The Mystic Red was her boat, and she didn't like the idea of a stranger knowing more about it's going on than her. "I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, Captain Bucket," she said, turning back to him. "I don't know what makes you think it's a riddle." Gemma rolled the scroll and scanned the parchment. She paused, then looked up again. "Okay, fine, it's a riddle." More curious than the hidden riddle was the way in which it was writing the beautiful black ink. Calligraphy had a quality that she had seen only twist while sailing the 8 seas. The first time was in a ledger stolen off a royal ship that she had won in a game of checkers. Milo lost it in a different game of checkers. The same night, the second was on a spyglass telescope that Gemma's uncle had shown her, a gift from old friends. He had said this writing was just as intricate and graded with even more care. "How did you know what was on here?" asked Gemma. Chuck Bucket gave his biggest, kindest smile. "I know a riddle when I see one. I deal with them quite a bit in my travels." Gemma pondered this for a moment. She had known some treasure hunters that traded rings late into the night on a young journey. They didn't eat for entertainment, but also to test their wits. A few of the riddles were ancient and well known, the kind of riddles that some children called and were prudy. But sometimes a sailor would come from a distant land with a riddle that was yet untold. Gemma liked the idea that the world still held secret riddles waiting to be solved, and so I suspect that Captain Chuck Bucket had uncovered a great many in his work. "So, let's have it," he added. He leaned in close and stuck his hair out towards her. Gemma read the scroll aloud in a small pond. "I was a small fish. Now is the time to grant me my wish." She read it aloud a second time to be sure. Gemma and Milo looked at each other with blank stares. "I don't get it, Milo," said Gemma. "Was there a fish in the ship?" Milo crossed his arms and shook his head. He was not a finished thief. Captain Chuck Bucket sighed and stood up straight again. "I had hoped it might be more difficult. I do enjoy a difficult riddle. You mean you know what the answer? Gemma asked with surprise. Indeed, I do, he replied. There was a great pause. So, will you tell us? Spit it out, Gemma. Captain Bucket stroked his chin and thought for a moment. I'm it, he said. I'm it. Milo lifted his finger in the air excitedly, then hopped down to rummage below deck. He came scurrying back up on two legs, holding a checkers board. No, Milo, urged Gemma. You are not playing him in checkers for it. You'll end up losing the boat. Milo put and turned back around. He's never won, whispered Gemma to Captain Bucket, and I don't mean that as an exaggeration. I mean, not a single time. And he played a chicken twins. Bad luck, I'm sure, said Captain Bucket swiftly. Then his eyes lit up as if an idea had just struck him. Why don't we try this next? You give my that elegant purple ribbon in your hair, and I give you the answer. It will add nicely to my collection, he said. Gemma touched the ribbon in her hair. My ribbon? She questioned, undoing the knot and holding it in her hands. I suppose I just got it back out. Then you won't miss it much. Captain Bucket reached out and grabbed it from her hand, then secured it in his own wavy hair. He retreated to the steering wheel of the dusty rust bucket and waved Gemma farewell. Goodbye, Gemma. A chance encounter I won't soon forget, he said, pulling away. Milo right back and sat on the railing, looking out. Wait, shouldn't Gemma? What's the answer to the riddle? Captain Bucket gave one last smile and clapped his hands to his mouth. Sometimes what we just need room to explore. That ship you found is looking for a bigger pond, and with that he spun the dusty rust basket towards the horizon and sailed away. Gemma stood watching for a moment longer. We make deals with some interesting people, Milo, she said to a nut. Milo picked up the tiny ship and handed it to Gemma. It was hardly the straightforward answer that Gemma had wanted, but it was still a step in the right direction. The tiny ship needed more room. It needs a bigger pond. The pair peered over the edge of the boat into the water and watched low waves slap the hull. It doesn't get much bigger than that, she said. It was the best and only idea that she had. Gemma took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and dropped the tiny ship over the edge of the misty red. I sure hope it floats, she added. The ship plopped down below the surface, sending out rips, then bobbed back up. A small cylinder in the back of the boat that Milo had assumed was a miniature barrier became electrified by the saltwater ocean. It worried and waced until a propeller propelled out of the end. It turned slowly at first, and then boiled upstream until it was spinning so fast that the blades couldn't be seen. With a gentle hum, the tiny ship sped off in a direction only it knew. Milo, that ship is getting away. Gemma jumped back to the steering wheel, using all of her might. She grabbed a peg on the wheel and pulled hard to spin the boat around. Milo grabbed his tail and hands around another one and pulled alongside her. That's it. She shouldn't. The boat had turned almost all the way around by the time they were on course to follow. Milo climbed up the mast and used their spyglass telescope to spot the tiny ship. Whenever Gemma veered too far in one direction, Milo would squeak and point to the starboard or port. The Mystic Red had a great size advantage over the tiny ship that it was tailing. However, a sailboat is that wheel of the wind, and must at times take a more indirect road to get where it's going, so it was with both luck and skill that Gemma and her first mate, or first primate, as she liked to joke, caught up to the ship in time to see it find the lightning current. Gemma had her tales of a current of electric blue, so powerful and full of life that it lit up the surface of the sea. But she had never seen it. She didn't truly believe anyone else had either. But as they approached the teeny ship, there was no denying that it was reading down the center of a glowing blue stream. They bear every shape and color of lightning. The teeny ship sagged and sagged with the turns, and Gemma did her best to stay the course. She no longer needed Milo's navigation, since the sea itself was showing her the way. The lighting pattern got slimmer and slimmer as the two vessels approached a sandy shore. The teeny ship stopped dead just before the break of the waves on the shore. Gemma dropped anchor and watched from a dove as it let out a few bubbles and flipped over. The hull opened up just before the ship sank out of sight. In this place, it left a message in a bottle floating on the water, waiting to be opened. Chapter 5. Sandy. Gemma and Milo sat around a campfire off the shore at dusk. They had found nothing but dunes, which are small hills of sand and desert, and Gemma decided it was best for them to stay near the Mystic Red for the night. The biggest reason was that there was no way to tell where the teeny ship had led them. Nearest Gemma could figure the ribbon, Gemma had been somewhere on the edge of the blue sea, and its waters were, by far, the most mysterious of the eight seas, Almost all of her treasure hunting was done in the Cascade Sea and the Sparkling Sea. Occasionally, she ventured throughout the Mosaic Sea to Island Hope, but that was more Milo than for inches. Gemma always found a reason to stop by Lemur Island while they were there, to Milo's outer jail. The Blue Sea thought had a reputation for legend and danger. There were even rumblings of fantastical creatures, but Gemma knew never any evidence of first-hand accounts. Once they found whatever it was they were looking for, Gemma vowed to sail them strategy back home to Harbour Town. But first they would need to decipher another riddle. This time it had come from a bottle. Gemma held the empty bottle in her hand and read the clue on the piece of paper aloud once again. As the day rised, the cottonlets ran, followed their tracks by the light of the sun. The fire crackled as Gemma and Milo pondered the words. Cottontails. They must be mean rabbits, right? Milo curled his tail into a tight ball and hopped around on all fours. Quit it, Milo. This is serious business, Gemma said with a laugh and a smile. Milo grabbed a bundle of licorice and shaved off a piece that he felt he'd earned for his performance. Gemma had laid out some food around the campfire that she got from the yellow knap snack that she always brought on expeditions. There was sourdough bread, Yorkie apples, orange, and bundle of licorice that was getting smaller by the hour. Whatever we're supposed to do next, it was to wait for morning. By the light of the sun, the riddle says. Gemma pulled out a deck of purple giants and goblins cards. They were a gift from the uncle soon after her parents sent her to stay with him. They're good for passing the time on the sea, he would say. Remember, the giants might be stronger, but goblins have the numbers and the smarts. Her uncle had taught her all the best combinations and tricks. His shipmates taught her all the best ways to cheat. Cheating was a big part of the game as anything else, even more so when Milo was playing. They played game after game until the stars were glowing as brightly as the lying bugs nearby. I play a stone giant, said Gemma triumphantly. Milo looked at his deck with his tongue slightly sticking out of his mouth, a thing of highest level of concentration. We give a sly whizzing chuckle and lay down for goblins. 3 that had weapons and 1 that was holding a lyre, a musical instrument. He raised his hands and shot them together triumphantly. Wait a second, let me see your tail, she demanded. Milo spun around but confidently kept his tail high from view, but Gemma stood up and spotted the 4 clandestine cards He was gripping behind his back. "I knew it," she said. "You're a goblin chief." Milo looked back up at her with the widest, most innocently yellow eyes he could muster, until a smile swept over Gemma's face involuntarily. Soon they were lying. "I don't know why I bother playing with you," she lisped. Milo stood up proudly and let out a series of serious and determined squeaks. I know. You came from a long time of cheers, and it was your great grandmother's last wish that you carry on that tradition," Gemma translated. It was, in fact, exactly what Milo was saying. Gemma laid back onto a piece of driftwood and looked up at the moon, full in the sky. She tapped her side and Milo nodded to accept, snuggling in next to her. "What do you think it is, Milo? What's the most greatest teacher in the world?" Milo thought for a moment, then hopped up with a smile. He pointed to his tail with both hands and squeaked. Gemma smirked and then laid back down dismissively. "It is not a gold-tailed ringlet. Not everyone has a tail, you know." Milo searched and laid back down. Gemma didn't say it, but there was more than one occasion when she had thoroughly, desperately wished she had a tail. It was hard to have a best friend with Milo's tail talents. It was a constant reminder that he, her, rare, and was inferior in all but one way, staying in chairs. Milo had a difficult time finding a place for his tail. If a Jean gave her the chance to grow one, she would have taken it. All it would have meant finding a Jean with a very specific set of powers, and then it would mean a lot of explaining behind a human with a lemur-sized tail for the rest of her life. These were thoughts that carried Gemma off to sleep that night, a tail upset Jenny, and a lifetime of arguments with pants markers. It wasn't the sound of or Milo snoring that woke up Gemma, but the low troubling rumble of a stamp. The vibration rocked her awake and caused her eyes to open through heaving blinks. A cloud of sand was approaching their chamber. "Wake up, Milo. It's I don't know what it's," Gemma yelled. Milo sat upright and rumbled his eyes. A piece of liquor still hung from his lips as he looked around. He was just in time to see a blur of ears and feet and tails storming into the center of their campus. They were moving in a spiral, right in formation. A hard and sharp turn towards the desert led them straight over the sand dunes, out of sight. There was no missing it. These were continental rabbits, just as Gemma had expected, but she had not expected what they found in the rabbits'
wake. Milo stuffed the dangling liquor into his mouth as they stared at the bare ground, with not a speck of food left.
Chapter 6 Spiced. After them yelled Gemma. The pack of cottontail rabbits had cleared the beach and buried into the desert. Milo grabbed the snack of the sandy shore and hung into Gemma. They followed after the rabbits, picking up squares of sand like a tornado in a field of flowers. Running with all the speed they could muster, Gemma and Milo kept up for the better part of an hour. Under the blistering sun, it was getting harder and harder to keep up their pace. The rabbits, it seemed, were a bit more adept than them at desert sprints, whether they wanted to admit it or not. As the sun hit the middle of the sky, the chase brought them all to small desert oases with palm trees, green plants, and a small freshwater pond. "Am I seeing this, Milo?" asked Gemma, out of breath and so hot that her hair seemed to be sweating. Milo's white eyes and drooling grin told her that she wasn't. "No time to stop," she panted. "We need to catch those rabbits." Milo let out this point squeak but pressed on. The rabbits tore through the oasis without a second thought and continued on to large dunes. When Gemma and Milo took the same path and came to the top of a dune, the rabbits were gone. All they saw were row upon row of sand dunes. "They couldn't go anywhere," said Gemma. "Those dunes make it impossible to see." Milo raised his finger to make a point, then flopped back on the sand. "Milo, are you okay?" she asked. Milo didn't answer. "Do you want to go to the oasis?" she asked. Milo didn't move. "Do you want me to carry you to the oasis?" she asked. Milo lifted his head and nodded with a smile. Gemma picked him up, and they made their way back down the dune, straight towards the oasis pond. The shade from the palm trees gave them immediately refilled from the sun overhead as they laid down by the pond next to each other. There was a dozen bushes and patches of uneven grass around the rim of the water. It felt cold and soft beneath their heads. It was the first moment of rest they had since wake up, and it felt better than good and colder than great to not be running. "How are we going to catch those rabbits?" Gemma asked, instead of answering. Milo rolled over into the pond and shoveled up as much water as she could. "Yeah, I guess we can figure it out tomorrow," she said. But Milo didn't hear her, because he was busy doing the backstroke. That night, under a sky filled with stars, they sat around a new fire and got ready for sleep. The water had rejuvenated them, but their food supply was dulling after the rambunctious rabbits had robbed them. This night's feast was smaller than the last, but they were happy to have it. As Milo chewed on a licorice stick, Gemma laid her head on a peculiarly comfortable patch of union grass. So, what do you really think the most greatest teacher in the world will be? She asked him. Milo hopped up and twirled his fingers around his tail from top to bottom with a series of squeaks. It is not a diamond-tailed spiral. Milo, not everything has to do with your tail, she replied. Milo chuckled to himself and laid down next to her. They stared up at the night sky and got lost in the sparkling partners above them. They're beautiful, aren't they? She said. Milo nodded happily. They remind me of the night before my parents left. My mom took me to a waterfall and Gemma was interrupted by Milo snoring. She leaned over, saw him fast asleep. Good night, Milo, she finished. The next morning, they were woken again by the nerd of cottontails. Exhausted from a day of pursuit, Gemma and Milo had slept up the way throughout to midday. The rabbits headed straight toward the oasis as they had before. By the time Gemma opened her eyes and realized it was too late. Gemma had left their food out again, and the rabbits were devouring it as they passed. No, shoo! Get out here! She yelled, sitting up and reaching towards them. They were gone before she got to her feet. Gemma grabbed her bag and ran to the top of the dune, just like before the rabbits were gone. More gone even. It had taken Gemma longer to climb the dune. In her sleep state, Milo had impossibly not even woken up. They're gone again, she said as Milo rubbed his eyes open. And they took the food we left out. Milo scrambled to the backpack and crawled inside to look through. He came back out with a frown. I know, she said. All we have left is some bread of 4 licorice sticks, a coconut, and those peas that make you, Gemma sput. Milo, I think I have an idea. Tomorrow, when they come back, you and I are going to be ready, she said with a grin. Milo grinned too, not because he knew the plan, but because he liked when Gemma grinned. Under the moonlight on the third night, Gemma and Milo laid down to sleep. Well, need to rest up if my plans is going to work, she said, fixing her pillow of onion grass. Milo snuggled up to soft brush and got cozy. So one last three, what do you think the most greatest teacher in the world is? Milo hopped up, even more excited than before. He swung his tail around like a lasso, hopped on both feet, pointed to the sky, then back at his tail, grabbed it around his leg, then danced a jig. Milo, that's actually okay. That would be pretty
amazing. Milo lay down and fell asleep with a smile on his face. When midday came, Gemma and Milo had packed their bag, drank lots of water, and were waiting in the center of the oasis. Bits and chunks of bread were spread out on the ground in front of them. The cottontail rabbits came over the horizon and headed right for their camp. Where we go, Milo? I hope this works. The rabbits ran over their camp just as they had each day before, and they are all the food. Just as they had each day before, and they eat all the food, just as they had each day before, when they climbed up the dune, with Gemma and Milo chasing them, where was not a speck of bread left. At the top of the dune, Gemma looked around and once again saw only sand. Milo looked to her, but she held up her hand. They stood waiting. Nothing happened. Come on, she whispered. And that's when a puff of sand shot up on the other side of a dune of their left, and then another. There, she said, appearing. They ran off in a direction of the sand puff. As they came to the top of the next dune, they looked around again. Another puff room, a different dune. It's working, yelled Gemma. The spices on the bread are making them sneeze, just like you, Milo. Gemma and Milo ran up and down dunes all afternoon, never losing track of the rabbits and their sandy sneeze. Then, to their surprise, the puffs of sand stopped moving. They all come from the same place. On the other side of the tall dune, when Gemma and Milo reached the top, they looked down over a group of sleeping, sneezing cottontail rabbits curled up together. They were lying at the foot of a dirt path that stretched through a few trees, then on into a deep, dark forest. Chapter 7 Story. Young Gemma and her mom had stopped at the foot of a waterfall. The moonlight hit the water and made it glow a silver blue as it rolled over the rocks and down to the stream below. Gemma thought of how this might be last time that she saw the night sky over the rainforest with her mom. It made her love the flickering stars even more, and for a reason she couldn't completely understand. It made her angry at each and everyone. She stood across the imagined that she was only a few years of eating vegetables away from drawing even. Gemma, do you know why your father and I are explorers? Asked her mom. The answer was so simple to Gemma that she was almost confused. It's fun. That's part of it, said Gemma's mom with a smile, but far from all of it. Gemma's mom leaned down close to the stream and reached in with both hands. She scooped up an impressive amount of water. A few more years of drinking milk, and Gemma's hands would be just as large, she was sure. What do you see in my hands, Gemma? She asked. Gemma was confused again. These were hardly questions, worthy a waterfall chat. It's water, she said confidently. Gemma's mom spread her fingers and let the water slip down like the waterfall. A layer of mud covered her hands. And now, that's mud, answered Gemma. Gemma's mom lifts through the mud until glimmers of gold rose to the surface. And now, Gemma's eyes sparkled as she looked at the precious metal in her mom's hand. You see, there is wonder all us around us, explained her mother. She pointed to the water in the sea. She slapped to the mud into Gemma's hands, making her laugh in the heart. Gemma's mom looked up. "And in the sky?" interrupted Gemma. "That's right," said her mom. Gemma looked up, her eyes still sparkling until she remembered. "But why do you have to go?" she asked. She could feel the tears coming whether she wanted them or not. Then it was her mom's turn to get serious. Since the beginning, it was been the job of explorers to find the wonders of this world and to keep them safe, she explained. "And to keep them secret?" asked Gemma. "Precisely," replied her mom. "We are a group. We work together to protect these wonders. But there is one of us who will take them, who will use them for their own gain." Gemma's face scrunched up in anger. She understood that it was wrong for someone to take things that weren't theirs. But more than that, she understood that her mother and father were leaving because of wherever this person was. "Who is it?" she cried. "I'll stop them." Gemma's mom reached out and grabbed her hand with a smile. "I know no doubt you would, but it's a job for your father and I. There are things you still don't know." "Like what?" demanded Gemma. There were few things that Gemma disliked more than not knowing things that she wanted to know. It ranked just below to having things that she wanted to have. "There is a key," her mom roared. "Like a key to open something?" asked Gemma. "Yes," answered her mom. "Although we don't know what it looked like. It was here, underground, and they come for it." It was a lot for Gemma to understand. "Then come to the jungle?" "Yes, but don't worry. They have done interesting in us. They were just looking for the key." "And they took it?" asked Gemma. "It seems that the key is still hidden, but we don't know where. We must find it before any else does." "Gemma?" "Why?" asked Gemma. "What is it?" Gemma's mom found her favorite constellation in the sky and let out a sing. "The Staff of Dreams." "Gemma?" "The Staff of Dreams."